everyone, welcome back to another episode of the NGA podcast, where we dive into all things gymnastics. Whether you're guiding a team, cheering from the sidelines as a parent, or training to reach that peak performance, we're here to share expert tips and inspiring stories that will empower you to excel. I'm your host, Rebecca Grady, and I'm joined here with my incredible co-hosts,
Dr. Ian Kreider.
Rob Axelrod.
Thomas Britton.
And in today's episode, we're going to continue to try to tackle how structure should be in our gymnastics gyms. On the last episode, we talked about what a well-structured practice looks like, how to balance those warm-ups, drills, rotations, and then incorporate that rest and mental training to create a more effective training environment. But what we didn't go into is what happens when structure leans too far in one of the directions. So is it too structured or is it a little too relaxed? Some practices can be planned down to the second, leaving little room for gymnasts to adjust, ask questions, or work on their individual needs. And then on the flip side, practices that lack structure can make it easy for gymnasts to get distracted, miss out on those key drills and progressions that they might need to create a good gymnastics foundation. Neither extreme is ideal. So today, we're going to dive into those pros and cons of each approach, and most importantly, talk about how can we find the right balance so gymnasts can train effectively while staying engaged, improving, and mentally healthy. So let's maybe start the discussion with what happens when there's too much structure. What are the pros and then what are the cons to having this type of structure in your gym?
And I think I'm one that can tend towards overly structured practices. And so I think, I can speak to pros and cons with that. With pros, I think you can predict progression a lot easier. Right. So you know when they're getting better, you know how fast it typically takes them to get better. So there's some good pros to being structured, but overly structured then brings on some cons where all of a sudden when someone doesn't fit that exact mold, then they fall out. And if you have, 1,200 rec kids to choose from, and you got like 100 level 3s, and you can whittle it down to a couple of level 10s, then I guess you can get away with it and still feel successful. But I think you run the risk of kids falling out of your program when things are overly structured.
Yeah, I tend to think the same way. I like the structure, but in the fallout part, when it's overly structured and they don't fit the mold, I try to teach them that it's not a cookie cutter. And you have to explain to them what a cookie cutter actually is, right? Because they don't know. They just go to the Amazon and get their Christmas cookies. So when they're trying to do like a basic, though, a basic level 8 bar routine, we're all striving, I think, as coaches to get that, a pirouette and 2 giants to a double tuck with some kind of circle, either a toe hand, a stalter, or a free hip. And I feel like that when it's overly structured, everybody does the same circle. Everybody has to do a free hip, or everybody has to do a toe hand, or everybody has to do a stalter. So you have coaches that are that way, and then everybody kind of looks the same. If you see it in college, right? The college coaches have it so overly structured that every kid's routine is exactly the same. Who sticks and who doesn't, that becomes the best. It doesn't really work for me in the overstructured part because then you get the fallout because the kid didn't fit the mold. And in my program, I don't have a big optional program. So if you get 1 or 2 that drop out, now you're down to 1 level 10. We're trying to have a team of level 10s, 5 of them, 10 level 10s would be great. How about those 18 level 3s? That's as structured as it gets. It's overly structured because it's compulsory. And so, NGA comes along, that kind of helps out where you don't have to have the structure in a compulsory. You can change it up for your athletes. Great idea. Works really well. Excel program works in the USAG program as well. If kids can't fit level 3, you put them gold and away they go. So the overstructure, I think for me, gets more fallout than I would like. I feel like I have my structure that I want to fall to, but individualize, and especially in my day group. So, it's not going to be complete structure there because each kid is different in the different levels. So I agree with the overstructure will definitely give you some fallout.
Yeah, I think Thomas will probably have some good stuff on this because I know I get a benefit from being on the men's side of gymnastics and then coming over to the dark side, the women's side of things that, men's side, a lot of times there's no structure at all when you're on the men's side of things. And then all of a sudden some structure gets introduced and you're like, oh man, I could have been doing this my whole life. This is great. But on the men's side of things, in order to keep kids in the program, because it's so much harder to keep men involved, typically you lean a little bit more towards understructured in a lot of gyms, and just to try and keep everybody involved. And then just the vast majority of kids are not going to do the same thing in men's gymnastics, right? And your optional routines look so much different compared to the women's side of things where everyone kind of does the same thing until like level 10. And then all of a sudden you start seeing a few different things. What do you think, Thomas?
Yeah, no, I agree. With boys, it's a bit different. I've been starting to coach the girls a little bit more in my gym as well. Been helping out with them, and they just do what I say typically and just listen. I'm like, well, this is odd. This is way easy. I never thought I'd get this far. But with my boys, there's only so much you can just like do this, do this constantly and try and keep them to like such a rigid formula before they just get bored. And then you can't have a program if you don't have kids in the gym. So for me, too much structure has a bigger impact on attitude for the men, at least that I've seen so far. It's good that we do the same things a lot every day. That's how you build consistency and progression. But at the same time, they're like, we're doing this again. And it's like, okay, well, I know I need to change it up as well. So I don't know. It's easy to say that, oh, you got to find that perfect balance because if everybody could do that, it'd be perfect, right? But, I try to do the best I can finding a balance for my boys of, these are at least some things we have to do every week and I'm not going to budge on that, such as, conditioning and basics on like event specific basics. But then once we get out of meet season and into the summer and, early fall, let's have a little bit more fun with it. What do you want to work on? Especially when I get to the higher levels. Younger boys is a bit tougher. And I'll give them like options of all things that I want them to do. Like you can do this or this, and they're both things that they need anyway. But the older boys, I really do let them have some freedom, and that gets them very excited to be like I also have some control over my gymnastics. I get to pick the routines that I want to do. So there's just a very fine line between, not just practice formatting structure, but also structure in their minds in terms of the freedoms they may get to have in practice and some of the choices they get to make for their own gymnastics.
Yeah, that's a really big thing with the structure. Like day group for me is so super structured. They come in, we have a warm up on trampoline. It's always different, but it's always something. They come in, they have free time to bounce, but it's kind of like a structured free bounce. It's either front layout day or it's standing handspring double tuck day, and like that's before we even do a jog or anything. They're just bouncing on tramp. And so then it's their run, then it's their conditioning, and it's like 5-star, I call it. And there's 5 essential items that they do every day. It's cast handstands, it's leg lifts, chin thigh levers, press handstands. What's my last one? And rope climbs. Duh. And so like those 5 things have to get done every day. And then I might throw in like a little shoulder circuit or like I was telling you earlier, IYTs and lower back on 2 days a week. So the structure is there, but then we come in to the night group after 5 hours or 4 hours of like structured high level intense gymnastics to 35 girls from, silvers up to Excel sapphires or Excel diamonds. And some of my diamonds are doing some really great things, giants and blind changes and flipping your Chenkos and, Rudy's on floor. I mean, they're doing real great gymnastics. But then you got like 4 girls laying on the floor with a, stack of cones and they're flipping the cones to try to catch it on the other cone they called cones. And I look back there and I'm like, what are you doing?
Do that too?
They're like, what are you doing? They're like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, hold on. You're up. Well, one second. They flip the last cone. And in a day group, I'd be like, and it's like, well, okay, I'm finish my turn. You flip my cones. And, oh, yeah, I'll vault next. And so I have to round shift because otherwise I won't have those kids in the program. And there's 65 of them. And so, and out of those 65, 10 of them might move over to the optional program when they're ready. So it's the structure I wouldn't say completely unstructured. They have structure. They know their assignments. It's written on a board. We change it up every day. They have an expectation, warm up half an hour, conditioning half an hour, go to events. So there's the structure on that end of it. But it's when you get to the event where the structure lightens up a little bit, I guess you should say, maybe for my Excel kids especially, or my night group, whatever they are. So I think I found the good balance, I think.
That's good.
I think it's really good to not put kids in that cookie cutter like you were talking about earlier, because you don't actually end up realizing what they're good at.
Yeah.
Right? On the coming from the men's side of things, it was and I had a coach growing up that was kind of learning with us, right? And so he had only kind of made it to level 7, and so we would go to other gyms and he'd learn how to spot something, and we'd come back to the gym and we'd do it, right? And so, like every once in a while, me and my 2 older teammates, we just start looking through the code of points and be like, hey, let's try this skill today. And we would just try, and it was a skill from like the 1950s that nobody does anymore or something.
Right.
But it was fun to try, and we ended up, hey, there it is. Yep. So then
Did you ever see the drawings of that thing?
Oh gosh, yes. So, we'd figure out some things like, oh, actually, it turns out I'm really good at this kind of random style of skill.
Right.
And so I've tried to do that with some of my girls every once in a while, like, maybe once a month or maybe a little bit more often during the summer. We'll just have a day where everybody tries a hecht mount on bars. We're just like, just for fun. Let's just see what happens here. Or everyone tries toe shoots to the high bar. Even my level 6s are giving it a shot. And so we're just trying some other things and figure out, all right, hey, actually, you turned out to be really good at toe hands, and normally we teach clear hips. That's
Right.
cool. Let's do some toe hands, right?
Well, I ran into that same problem where everybody had to do a toe hand, but I made them do a free hip for a backup, like just like a little flat free hip.
Yep.
And so the same thing with the toe hacked up to the high bars. I think I told you last week there, I look over there and like the level platinums and golds or whatever were all doing heck ups. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these kids barely do straight arm kips. What are they doing? But I did it yesterday. The kids were kind of messing around in the night group, and 3 kids had this great sit up, swing to kip handstand on the high bar. I went, maybe I got to play around a little more often. But, that is
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you find, like I got the one kid who likes to do her toe hand. She likes to go giant stall toe hand. And I'm a sucker for you got to do 2 foot, no step ins.
Oh, yeah.
And so I call it the Walmart version, right? If you do a step in, you gave up. And so I have this thing. I think I told you about it, right? Mancino has it. It's like a reverse. Well, it's not a reverse. It's like a UMAT standing up, but it's thick blocks, and it's 2 blocks like this. So they'll go cast, put their feet on, and then they'll go through the blocks to toe hand, toe circle, come off, come back to the blocks. So you do that for 3
nice.
months. You do that for a month, 30 days, and you'll get a kid doing toe hand, toe hand, toe hand, back to the block, toe hand, back to the block, toe hand. Because they go here to here and then toe on. So there's no arch on, there's no step in. And the kids that don't get it, I'm like, okay, just step in. Like I have to let it go. Because, I'm like, no, no, you have to do 2 foot. So this kid's doing this giant toe hand at level 8. I'm like, no, I said, hit your first handstand and do the toe hand there. I don't want you to stop a giant. So I was really forceful about it, like, no, you're not going to leave until you go cast handstand, toe handstand, giant flyaway. And finally I just said, just let it go. And so
Yep.
again, I
There you
gotta
go.
let some of my structure go, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I've noticed when it comes to a lot of structure is that gymnasts have more anxiety. I feel like there's higher expectations. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it also depends on the coach's personality and how they coach, the dynamic in the gym. Like, they don't like talk to their gymnasts. Like, I think that makes structure infinitely worse. But the gymnasts that I've worked with seem to have really high anxiety. They have these perceived, like we've talked about before, they perceive all these expectations from all these people around them. So it makes it really difficult for them to excel in that environment when it comes to learning new skills and being consistent. But why don't we flip it and talk about those gyms, those programs that don't have as much structure? We've talked about some of the good things that come from that kind of environment, but what are some other things you guys think? And then maybe those cons that you've seen that you're like, this is a reason why we need to have some structure.
Yeah, unstructured gyms, because I've traveled around to different gyms and helped them out with planning and programming and getting some structure into their gym. And so I would say the unstructured gyms, they do really well at keeping the kids involved and entertained and loving the sport, which is awesome. But they peak out really early. Right. And so, they might max out at like level 6 or level 7, just because of the lack of structure and the lack of planning and programming. They know a goal, but they don't really know the process to get to that goal. And so they typically don't meet that highest level goal simply because they haven't done the process, because they haven't planned for it. And it's not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing, right? There's all sorts of gyms for all sorts of gymnasts, and you do have to find the right gym for the right gymnast. Not everyone is going to be a college athlete. Not everyone is going to make it to level 8, and that's cool. But find the right gym that matches the personality and the goals of your gymnast, and I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's the unstructured. Sorry if you got something there. Go ahead, Rebecca.
No, I was just going to ask Ian if he sees more injuries in like unstructured environments or too structured environments. Like what have you seen across the board with injuries?
Yeah, so it's probably actually about the same, meaning that too much structure causes lots of injuries and not enough structure causes lots of injuries. And this is like this perfect nexus in between the two, where you get this decrease in injuries because you have enough structure to progress them safely, but you don't have so much structure that you can't pull back and reset your course of action when you need to.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Before I really settled down, and like I would stay like 2 or 3 years or 4 years at a club, change their whole environment, raise the level of their gymnastics, educate their coaches, and then just move on, go to the next gym and do it again. And it was good. It was like financially, it was good for me. And it was always like a side gig. I had my teaching job and I was always at somebody's gym doing something. And it was fun because I never got stale. But I've been out here for 10 years and I like it here because I have so many other things. For me, it's structure for me that keeps me sane, right? So, but I don't overly structureize like mine, but in the gym, but the no structure that I used to see at other gyms, actually, I felt like there was less injury because they were doing stuff that they were trying to do that they wanted to do, or only the things that they wanted to do. So there was less risk. So I saw like less injuries in those type of gyms. But if you started to, like when I came in, I started to train them, like all of a sudden I got an elbow soreness, wrist soreness, there's ankle soreness, knee soreness, because they're not used to that style of training. So that was one of the cons. If you take a really unstructured program and turn it into a structured program, they're going to be doing more of competitive and repetitive things. That's going to give you some more like chronic injuries. And I'm happy to say, I'm proud to say here, my program is almost as long as I've been doing this, because going to school and exercise science background and all of that kept me smart on what I'm going to do with my athletes, with just making sure I'm not overdoing. And we really don't have any chronic injuries here, except, the one kid, but you all know about. And so I think that the unstructured program is great for gymnastics, because then that means that more kids want to come in and do it. But like, I don't like unstructured in the class program, because then it just becomes a free for all. Like, we don't do open gym. Why don't we do open gym? I know if I did open gym, I'd get 60 kids in here on a Friday night paying $25. Do that math as a business person or a gym owner. You're like, wow, I'm, picking up 2 G's a week, just doing nothing. Just, I don't even have to have 4 people there. These kids are just running around like monkeys. But that's the problem, is it's too unstructured, and that's where you're going to get the major injuries.
Yeah, and you'll see that risk of injury go up when you change things like what you just said. So if you are a club owner or a head coach that's thinking about adding more structure in, it's good. But just know that if you change things too radically, too quickly, then you're going to increase risk of injury then. I always like to simplify it down to running, because running is one of those things that it's very simple to understand because it's just running. There's no height involved. There's no big risk involved. And so with runners, like, you don't want to increase their weekly mileage by more than about 10 to maybe 20% per week, right? So if you're doing 6 miles a week, you don't want to all of a sudden do 12 miles next week. Right? Because then you're going to have lots and lots of
Injuries.
Yeah. And so same thing in your club as well. You go, all right, well, if I want to start adding some structure, I want to make sure that I'm not adding so much getting in with the competitive side of things that I start risking injury. So we're not going to all of a sudden go from, we typically try 3 or 4 series on beam, but you know what? The good clubs do like 15 a day. So starting tomorrow, 15 a day. Right? So yeah.
So like, when you're trying to rebuild that structure, when I was trying to do that at different gyms for different people, I'd pick an event and we'd structure that event, focus on it for like a month. And this way it wasn't too much. And it goes right back to what those of us that are in this, like, you're more so than me because you got doctor in front of your name, but frequency, intensity, duration, right? And so my kids in here know what we don't increase 2 of those at the same time. If we're going to increase frequency, then we stay there for 3 weeks. If we're going to increase intensity, then we stay there for 3 weeks. If we're going to add a day for duration, after the day for duration, if you were training 4 days a week and now we're going to 5, it's going to be there for a couple months before I decide to increase anything else anywhere else. Got to get your body get used to it. So all of my kids know that stuff too, and they definitely know, like, we don't come in like, okay, today it's 8 routines. We don't only doing 3. So, but we built up to it. It was 5, then it was 6, and then today's 8 routines. But I do fall finish and it doesn't count, or I'll do fall stop, it doesn't count anyway, and you got to restart. But that stinks for the kid who falls on a dismount because they're doing a big full routine, right, on a beam routine, and they fall on a dismount. So
yeah, and for like the parents out there that are listening to this, if you're in the middle of trying to change gyms or something like that, I see lots and lots of injuries happen too from a kid that goes from a 3-day-a-week program to now I'm going to that best program in the area that works out, 5 days a week, 25 hours a week, and my kid's going to be so good. And then like a month later, they're injured. It's just because they just added way too much, way too soon. So parents, be careful of that and try and introduce things slowly if you are going to change gyms or start a new team program where your pre-team kid was just going 1 day a week and now they're going 3 days a week for 10 hours a week, right? just be careful with those things. And then on the coach's side of things, when you have a kid coming into your program, or let's say you're that level 2 or level 3 coach and you know they're bumping hours up significantly between pre-team and level 2, or you're inheriting some kids or whatever it is, and you know that their workload is going to increase, work them in slowly. It's okay if they don't keep up with your kids at the very beginning, your established kids, because they shouldn't, right? They should be worked in slowly.
Yeah, our pre-teamers go 2 days a week, 2 hours a clip, and there's like 19 of them. And then summer's going to hit, and some of them will go to level 3, and it's 3 days a week at 3 hours a clip. So that's 9 hours. So you're not only
Yep.
doing exactly what I said you're not supposed to do. The beauty the beauty of it is though that they're 7 and 8 years old, so you could throw a whole bunch of stuff at them. They're just going to go. It's like the 7-year-old who does like a 5-hour summer camp, and then it's nighttime, and we're up at Tennessee there at Flip Fest, and they're like, "Hey, can we do open gym tonight?" And we're like, "Do you not have any? Are you tired? You wanna go to sleep? Take a little break." So in the little kids, you can get away with it a little bit like that, but not more than that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and coaches will see that, and almost like it gives them permission to keep pushing like that, because little kids do recover a lot faster.
Yeah.
Like my son's in karate, and he's done a couple things where like they were doing some groundwork and he was having to do these like basically lunges, and he's kind of an overachiever. And so other kids were struggling with it, but he was just kind of going back and forth across the mat. And the next day he woke up, he's like, "Oh man, my legs really hurt." But he still, played all day and he was just fine. And the next day he wasn't even sore, right? Whereas like an adult or one of our
Forget
teenagers,
it.
if they did that,
Get
man,
on a
they'd look like a
wheelchair.
newborn baby giraffe walking down the stairs in the morning, and then for like 3 days they wouldn't be able to tumble. And so with the little kids, yes, they can recover a little bit faster, but don't make the mistake of just because they can means that you should.
It just
Right?
should, right?
Make sure that and they need to get in there and they need to figure out what team is all about, but don't keep pushing like that as they
Sure,
continue
sure.
to level up.
I just
Yep.
want to point out, I caught that little smirk over there, Miss Rebecca. He said that his son's an overachiever, and she's like, "Oh, geez." I knew there was a comment behind that smirk.
I was like,
"Oh, Dr. Ian's kid's an overachiever?" Oh.
Right.
I know. That's
Ridiculous.
that's funny that you saw that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, of course, it's
I'm a
Ian's kid.
profile-
Thomas, did you have anything you wanted to mention on those gyms that are not as structured? Because I know you said that on the men's side, you kind of have to have it a little bit more unstructured. So what have you seen?
I think in men's, it's a timing thing. You got to know when to have which, right? I think both can be very valuable. Like you said, like Ian and Rob said, it's great for keeping kids excited and engaged, right? That's the awesome part of it. But then I feel like there's no foundation, and we want to build kids to be athletes, to be in the gym for a long time, like, level 5 and above. You got to have a foundation of like conditioning, flexibility, all of that stuff, right? And you have to build that first. If you can build that foundation once they get to level 6 or 7, then you can have a little bit more of that looser structure, depending on what time of the season it is. But as younger athletes in the gym, I feel like the massive like idea of unstructure can lead to them not having a good foundation. And so then, they're trying, like, we just tried a back handspring today, we did a back tuck today, but they're not doing it safely, they're not doing it well, because they haven't built the right muscles and conditioning required to go do those things. So I feel like it's great until it's not great. They're going to be having a lot of fun, but then once it gets to a point of, hey, are we ready to take this next step? They're not ready for it. They can't go do the things that are going to be asked of them at the next level.
The same thing when you have, like, if you coach a tumbling class that's not gymnastics, and you have the gymnast that moved over to tumbling versus the cheerleader or tumble class kid that's just kind of done 1 hour a week for the last 2 or 3 years, the difference is huge. And you're going to see the gymnast progress really quickly through things, whereas the class kid or the cheerleader that hasn't gone through those progressions, they're going to progress a lot slower.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in there that back in the day, I don't know, back in the early 90s, I used to,
my day.
back in my day, I would be down at it was American Twisters, and Tim Rand was down there, and it was structured. I mean, as structured as could be. But no matter what level you were, you could come into the gym and they would put you in a group. And there was like, no extra fee or anything. But there was rules. And that's where the balance of the unstructured structure came in. Like, hey, I'm a level 5 gymnast and I come in Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. But I come on Tuesday and Thursday also, and he puts me in a group and I get to do more gymnastics. But the rule was don't miss your Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. You can't sub a Tuesday, Thursday just to do that. And then it was when you get there early, it was kind of sort of open gym. You could play like it is here in my gym. They get here early and they can play on the tramps. Sometimes the little ones are asked because they think I'm intimidating. I don't know why they think that, but
So scary.
so I look in the
It's
mirror.
the no
and then
hair.
you look in the mirror, and then I know why, right? So they'll come in there and they'll play like, Mr. Rob, can we go on the tumble track? Yeah, and you know what the rule is, and the rule is they can do anything they want that they do in class or on team or during practice. So that'll get some kid trying to chuck a double talk off the end of a tumble track, and because it's the foam pit, and so that's that's the structure on top of the unstructured. Because I love that they come here at 20 minutes early because they get to bounce tramp more than they do during practice, which is awesome. And they'll learn things like keeping their legs together or straight arm back handsprings. And they'll do a little add-on. They're allowed to do that. But it's structured to the point where I know I don't ever have to look over at somebody trying to do a full-on tramp who can't do a back tuck yet, or no one's trying to do a back tuck, or they can do I call it a backyard back tuck. They learn how to do it on their backyard trampoline. They come in here and it takes me a year to try to teach it to them correctly. So there's a no flip rule. If you don't flip during practice, you're not allowed to flip on tramp. So there's structure inside of an unstructured situation.
Yeah, it's good because it is important for the kids to play, I think, because when I first got to the gym I'm at now, the girls weren't allowed to play before practice at all. And we don't have a ton of equipment anyway, but there's a tumble track and they could have bounced around a little bit, right? But they weren't allowed to at all. And so the first day I got there, I was like, you guys don't know me. I don't know you. Let's just hop on tumble track and let's just do some things. Let me kind of see where you're at. And so we did, a couple of just punches down and all that. And I was like, all right, cool. Let's start doing some stuff. Give me just 3 back tucks in a row. Just back tuck, back tuck, back tuck, And all of a sudden their eyes like got about this big, and I was like, what's wrong? They're like, we've never done 3 back tucks in a row. We've never even done 2 back tucks in a row. I was like, let's do 2 back tucks in a row. Yeah. But it's just, it's things that I took for granted because I came in the gym and we bounced around on trampoline and, we'd learn how to like Cirque du Soleil, walk up the wall, bouncing on our back and on the trampoline. And we do all kinds of things, probably maybe a little too much play.
Wow.
There's that, all right, well, someone just did a Randy. So I guess it's my turn. Let me try it,
Exactly.
But they hadn't played at all, and so there's a good mix, right? Where of course just you're level 3 going in there chucking double fronts into the pit. That's not a good idea. But there's certainly some good play that can be had too.
Sometimes they come in and they're playing, and like I use a thumb strap, so it's like I don't know if I have one here to show you, but like if you take a scrunchie and you put it on your fingers, so that this would just on your thumbs, and they do their front handspring work with that. So they'll do handspring, and they have like a little bridge, a foam bridge between the 2 trampolines. So they'll go handspring, fly spring, or handspring with their hands on the little foam bridge onto the next trampoline. And so sometimes I structure it like, go get your thumb straps. We're going to do some front handspring work today. And I came here 20 minutes early to listen to you. And so I don't do that every time so that they don't feel like they don't want to get here early, because I like that they get here early and I like that they want to play. And sometimes we'll say, hey, let's try this today. We'll try something different. And then I'll catch them during playtime and they go get the thumb straps on their own. So like it's working to my advantage and to their advantage. So my little unstructured play with a little bit of structure worked out to have that really happy medium. So parents, if like the reason why we do everything has a reason for it, right? Everything we do has got a reason.
Right.
It was so funny, Rob, when you go, they asked me if they can go on tumble track, and I know like I don't have to like worry about them getting injured. I could never do that with boys. That's if I leave them alone for 10 seconds on a trampoline, there's a fire starting somehow. I don't know how.
Yeah.
So
one of my employees, her son is like, he's awesome. I think he's going to be a level 8 this year, but she's one of my best employees. Well, she comes in here on Sundays and I like see on Facebook or something, she posted a video. I'm like, that's at Ariel's. Like, woof, that was bad. Ooh, she let him do that again. Whoa, he landed on his head. Full in. Like, oh, these kids doing full in? Does she know how to teach you full in?
Right. Yeah, no, they get a little crazy. So I do let them have some free time if they come to practice early, but what I'll do is I'll go do like free time with them. I'll get on the trampoline and tumble track with them and start doing stuff. And they think it's so cool. But that way I can like, let them know like, hey, this is not like still practice. It's still like free time for you, but I am going to be here and I'm going to watch it to make sure you're not being insane. But I think they have a lot of fun that way. So at least on the men's side, I think it's very important to let them have that free time. They always have the energy. They want to do crazy stuff. They think it's, hilarious and awesome to do all this crazy stuff. And that's good to a degree. But it does need to be supervised. So I like to do the free time with them.
A cargo net that's over like our tumble track, and you can jump from the tumble track and try to grab the cargo net. And then
That's cool.
it's not super far. And so like you can climb up to the top. The cargo net doesn't quite go to the rafters and the ceiling. And I'll have them go up and then we'll pull the bottom of the cargo net out and we'll let the kids drop, like even in class. Kind of cool. So
I want
like
to do that.
yeah, right. It's fun. So then your free time, right? You like if there's a couple of boys, right? We don't have a boys program, but you know the boys like I look over, they're hanging from the rafters at the top. Like,
Yes.
what are you doing? Get down from there.
Yeah, and that's we didn't have a cargo net, but the I-beams that are in every
Yeah.
gym, right? We learned how to climb up the I-beams
Sure,
and
to
then
get
go
to the top.
across the 30-foot ceiling, and then
Drop
we'd have a
into the
resi
pit.
there, of course.
Oh yeah, we do the
didn't
same
have a
thing.
pit.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
just
Just climb all the way up into the ceiling and then drop off into the pit. It was every time.
That's a good transition because it's saying that we can have all this fun, but it's really important, especially with the boys, I guess,
Yes.
since
for
I
sure.
have not coached boys before, to have that underlying structure. So we're maintaining that safety. So a little bit of structure is really important. And it kind of sounds like that it's really important to base it off some of our gymnasts' individual needs,
Yes.
their age, their skill level. So let's talk about how coaches, if you're wanting to transition your team, like if you've identified like, oh, wow, I'm on one of these extremes, how can they start to transition to a more balanced program in their gym?
Yep, absolutely. I would say that the easiest one to transition from is the unstructured to structure, right? Sometimes it takes bringing someone in to figure out what that structure is like, or going to a training camp, or figuring out what it is, because a lot of times you just don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how to structure if you've never structured before. So learning from somebody, getting a mentor, hiring someone to do that, I think is a great idea. You probably can figure it out on your own if you're super dedicated and you're willing to watch thousands of YouTube videos and listen to, hundreds of thousands of hours of podcasts or whatever, right? You can probably figure it out, but it's going to take you so much longer than just going, hey, you've already done this thing. Cool. Let's figure out how to get that done.
Listen to this
So-
podcast, you can hire any one of us, right?
I know. That's what I was
That's right. That's right. So yeah, so introducing some structure is fantastic, but getting someone to help you with that is good, because we've already made the mistakes. We've already gone, oh yeah, that didn't work. I thought that structure was going to be good, and then it turns out that everybody had a busted up knee or whatever because of it. So yeah, there's lots of mistakes to be had. You don't have to make those mistakes. Someone has already done that. So just talk to somebody and get some structure in there.
The unstructured to structured is kind of works the same way. As Tom said, that the older the girls get, I let them have some skin in the game, so to speak. Like let's let them help out with the decision. So when you're super structured and you say to the girl or athlete, what do you think? What do you want to do? Like, there's no wrong answer here. There's no hidden message. Like, you don't have to say something. I'm not looking for an answer. If you say this, I'm not going to say, that's not what I wanted to hear. We teach them at a certain age where they get to be able to understand that they have some say, they have a voice. But that voice doesn't mean they get to always do what they want either. So you have to be careful, because some of the kids can't make the decision. They need you to make the decision for them. And those ones say, okay, never mind. You can't decide. This is what I want. But then they give you like the hard time. You're like, well, whoa, that doesn't work that way. You wanted me to pick for you. I picked for you. So now you're going to do it. Otherwise, they find their voice a little bit to be able to have a little skin in the game.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say, I think it's right around that flyaway or giant phase, right?
Yeah.
Where you go, all right, you tell me what the next step you want. You've seen everyone else get giants, right? You've seen low bar giants, you've seen bent knee giants, you've seen high bar, just go for it giants. You tell me what your next step is. What are you comfortable with? Let's go do that, right? And sometimes they'll come back with, well, what do you want me to do? I was like, nope, that wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question.
What do you want to do?
Right.
Yeah, I've been coaching about 6 years now, since since I graduated high school through college. And I've learned both. I've done both sides of it, made the mistake of doing both. My first couple of years coaching is a little too unstructured. It was more like focused on getting skills, not building a foundation. And then as I learned from other coaches at different gyms I went to, you got to learn that, all right, let's build this foundation first. I got a little too into the process. And like we said, not every kid's going to fit that mold. And so I was just like, getting frustrated, like not every kid could do exactly what I was asking of them to build this process, right? So I was like, all right, I got to step back, what works from each, and I tried to make a formula that works for at least my athletes in my gym. Obviously it does take a significant amount of time, but it's important for the athletes to get what they need. And as Rebecca mentioned in the transition, it's catering helps to the kid's skill set, age, what have you, because so we all have the same structure. But this kid's like, oh, I'm struggling a little bit more with my upper arm elements on P bars. Maybe can I put some more time into that? Is that okay? I'm like, of course, sure. Your support swings and your underhang skills are already wonderful. Some kids aren't as great at those, so they put a little bit more time to those. We're gonna hit the same numbers, okay, at the minimum. But now you can go off into this branch of it and do a little bit more of these if you feel like that's what you need and some extra time on. And yeah, also, you can even get as specific as like body composition for the men, right? The really tall, lanky guys aren't going to be great tumblers, but they'll be great on horse and high bar. So I'm going to go, let's spend a little bit more time on horse and high bar if you want, and we'll do what you need to do on the other ones. And the shorter, bigger, like, stockier kids are going to be great on floor and vault, but man, it's really hard for them to swing on that horse. They're too big. They can't get around their own arms. Um, so I think it's important to have a base foundation of what you're expecting, what the expectations are in every event. Basically, like, a minimum of where we need to be a good athlete on this event, but then also, all right, now, like, what do you need specifically to continue to be successful in your own way?
I've had some really great mentors in my life, and Kelly Hill, she's a 6-time Olympic coach, right? She got at least 6 Olympians under her belt. And just this year, we were discussing, and she's still mentoring me. How many years later? 30 something years later, we've been friends. And level 8, right? You want to do your release moves because you want to be ready for the next year. And a good release move takes a year. So it's like during level 8 practice, level 8, pirouette, circle, 2 giants flyaway, 2 giants double, work your doubles in the pit, work your release moves, look this, look that, little trampoline release move drill. And she's like, just stop worrying about the stupid base routine. Start teaching blind changes and blindfolds and front giants and do your circles and your in-bar work. And you got to do your release move. But they can't get past doing 2 simple basic routines. She's like, that's your problem. That's not their problem. It's you who wants it. And I'm like,
Hmm.
she's right. And that's me stuck in my own structure. So now it's just twice a week that we do those routines. So now, like, I try to make it warm up. You get 3 touches, you better swing a full routine in the warm up. So then that's 1. Then we'll move on. And so now it's like an incentive. So like, oh, I just get one of these little things done, pirouette, toe hand, giant double. Okay, what's next? That took literally 5 minutes. And so now there's 40 minutes left on bars to circle, to tramp drill, to release drill, to giants, blind changes. And so it's just happened just this year that Kelly gave it back of the head. What are you doing? Like, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I was talking to a good friend of mine this weekend while I was at our state meet, and we were just chatting, and he was like, talking about getting kids into college and things, and he was like, how many college athletes won level 6, level 7, level 8 regionals? Probably not most of them, right? Probably very few, but they just kind of hung around, and then finally they figured out what they were good at in level 9 and 10, and now all of a sudden you see this really good gymnast. So yes, of course, you need to teach good kip mechanics, and we've got to get that foundation laid. But yeah, if it's their level 8 routine isn't perfect every time they hit it, it's like, well, I wish it was, but also we've got bigger things to work on, and you've got everything you have to have. So let's get on with it.
Yeah, it's like the structure for the level 4s. Like it's kip. And the 3s, they want to do kips. And I'm like, well, you don't have a 3 routine yet, but you know what? Let them kip because they're going to be a 4 regardless. They're going to get to 4. And then the level 4s that can, and they're in handstands because we do handstand training. Now they're swinging giants. And everybody's like, what? The kid doesn't have a kip. I don't care. So let him swing giants. There's no regular progression. I have to have a kip before I get a giant, or I have to have a kip before I can do a cast handstand. No, teach cast handstands. I teach cast handstands on a men's bar over a trench, and they're 5. Boop, 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 boop. They're not scared. Like introduce it to them. So there's structure, but then that's part of the unstructured. But again, there's that underlying structure factor. They're getting spotted. We're teaching it in a certain way that it's going to help them later down the road. And that's where the little kids that are, I hate to use the word, but the little kids that can do, I let them do. Does that make sense? Because then I got like a kid who's been a 3-year level 3 and they still can't do a kip. They're being all taught the same way. Why is it that one kid can't get it? Am I not structured enough? Like, do I not spend enough time on kip? Come on, please. We all spend so much time on kips. My shoulder will tell you.
One thing that Rob said that I think kind of goes to just the whole trying to figure out if you have the right balance of structure in your gym is that self-evaluation. And I talk about that all the time when I talk to coaches. It's like, yes, it's important for our gymnasts to reflect on what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it to make improvements. But as coaches, we need to do the same thing. We need to have those open and honest discussions with ourselves about what does our gym look like? What results are we getting out of it? And how do we need to change this? What do I need to do to make this better than what it was before? Because remember, we always can grow, we can always change, and reaching out to people that we know have done it, who have programs that we've seen that were like, this is amazing. I need some help. I think that is another thing that we need to talk about more, is being okay with asking for help when we need it, especially as adults. We do this for kids all the time. We're like, hey, ask for help. That's so important. We don't have to be an expert in everything. Even if you are an expert, you still can learn and grow and change. So I think that's a huge thing to remember. And I think that goes to the structure of gym. It also goes to your coaching dynamic, your method in the gym. How are you wanting to have your gymnast see you? So I think there's just a big part of this in finding the right placement is asking for help and then doing that self-evaluation, figuring out what's going on in your gym. But I think we've kind of hit every topic. So to me, that's a wrap on this episode of the NGA podcast. So we've talked about the importance of finding that sweet spot between too much structure and too little, and how to adjust based on your gymnast development and needs. So coaches, I hope this discussion has encouraged you to really look at your programs to recognize where your own practices might fall on that spectrum and whether you should start looking at how to implement change. If you're still feeling a little lost on what to do, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments or on social media how we can expand on today's episode and help you create the right training program for your gym. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with fellow coaches, parents, and gymnasts, or leave a review. So thanks for tuning in, and until next time, stay happy, healthy, and high performing.